Hi friends, welcome back to another episode of So HoneyBea. In today's video, we are doing the Roly Poly bag by StarMade Patterns. Now I really did like making this bag. You can see why it's called the Roly Poly bag by the rounded edges. It has a slip pocket on the back where you can add a phone or whatever you want to put inside of there. And also, as you can see, it has a turn lock right here. Now, this was the first time I did a turn lock, and it wasn't as hard as I thought, so I'm really glad I did do that. Now let me open it up, and it has a zipper panel inside to get inside, and then it has a slip pocket inside as well. Now this little bag is quite easy to make. It has D-rings on the side, so you can add a crossbody strap with it. Now this gusset right here has top stitching all the way around, as you can see, but you have a choice as to whether or not you're going to top stitch that. For those of you who are just learning to make handbags, you can choose to skip it, or you can be adventurous and give it a try. It's up to you. So those are all the details, so let's get started. First of all, I want to go through all of the stuff that I have cut out and my hardware. Starting with the hardware, I have a turn lock and the washer. For my crossbody strap, I have 2 swivel clasps and the slider. Now for the D-rings, I have 2 of those. Now it calls for a 3/4 inch D-ring, but I had a 1 inch D-ring, so I'll show you how I accommodated for the pattern piece for that. And then I have the zipper here. Now this zipper also has a zipper pull on it, and it says "Be kind always." And I'm going to be using this zipper pull, although this zipper does in fact come with its own pull, but I'll be removing that and cutting that zipper down to size. Now for the D-rings. The pattern calls for a 3/4 inch D-ring. I am using a 1 inch D-ring, so I've extended out this pattern piece to accommodate for that 1 inch D-ring. Then I have the zipper panels. I've cut out 2 out of vinyl and 2 out of lining. My gusset, I have 2 out of lining that I've cut on the fold. And then I have 2 out of vinyl, and I have already glued down my foam to the pieces there, and I used Fabri-Tac glue. Then I have the slip pocket lining. I've cut out 1 out of vinyl and 3 out of lining, but it looks like I need to cut 1 more. This here is our handle, and there's 1 out of vinyl. Then the side gussets, I've cut 2 out of vinyl and then 2 out of the foam, and then again I've attached the foam to the vinyl. And then I have 2 out of the lining. Now for the flap, I have 1 out of lining, 1 out of the vinyl, and then I have also attached my foam to that as well. And then this one here is the bottom panel. I have 1 out of lining, 1 out of vinyl, and then I've attached the foam again using the glue. Then I have the front and back panel. I have 2 out of lining, and I have 1 out of vinyl and 1 with the foam, and then another 1 out of vinyl with the foam. Now this is the front and the back, and they're both the same piece. So as you can see here, so there's 2 of those, and they're all prepped. Okay, so those are all the pieces and the hardware that I have, and so now let's get started. Now I'm going to start off with my D-rings, and like I said, I'm using a 1 inch D-ring, so I cut this a little wider, but I kept the length the same. I've drawn a line down the center and put double stick tape on both ends. Now I'm going to fold the 2 long ends in on it themselves and top stitch using a 1/8 inch seam allowance. Okay, now I'm going to take another piece of double stick tape and put them on the short ends. Now I'm going to take my D-ring and place it down the center. Then remove this, fold it in on itself, making sure that the edges here are even with each other. And then put them both together to make sure they're the same height, which they are. And so you can see there how they've come in on each other. Okay, so there are our D-rings complete. Now let's go on to our next step. Okay, the next step is to make our handle. I have gotten my piece of vinyl and I have drawn a line down the center just like I did the D-rings, and I've placed the double stick tape on both sides, and now I'm going to fold the long sides into the center and then fold over twice and then top stitch. Okay, there's our handle complete. Now I'm going to set this aside and then go on to our next step. Okay, so now I have my zipper. I've cut it down to size and I've got my zipper pull on there. I've also burned the edges of both sides and I have marked where I want the zipper to fold. Now I'm going to fold the teeth wrong sides together. I'm going to hold the pinch right there, right where that mark is, and I'm going to pin it just like that, and do the same thing to this side over here. Now I am right-handed, so you can see that I have put the pins going this way, but this pin here, I want to hold it and now put the pin going this way and take this pin out. So now my zipper pull is all the way to the top, and you can see there that my both edges are straight with each other. So now what I want to do is I want to take this over to the machine and drop my needle right at that edge there, so that way it is going to hold down this area, and then I can remove the pin, and I just want to go forward and backwards just right here, just to tack those two edges down. There you can see that came out really good there, and I'm really happy with that. So now let's move on to our next step. Okay, so now I have put a mark across here. She has you do it at 1/4 of an inch. I've gone a little bit farther down than 1/4 of an inch, but then I'll cut it down. Okay, now I have my zipper and it is right side up. I'm going to take my vinyl piece and I'm going to put them right sides together. So my vinyl piece will be right side down. So you can see here now that they are right sides together. Now I want to sew across here using a 1/4 inch seam allowance. Okay, now I want to fold this back on itself. First, I want to cut this down to 1/4 of an inch past my seam allowance. So right there, like that. And let me put a piece of double stick tape on this side. Okay, now I want to fold this down and down again. Now I'm going to top stitch across here, and then I will finish off these other 3 edges, but I will trim them all up first of all. Okay, now I want to clean up all my threads and then burn my edges. So now our zipper tab is done and we can go on to our next step. So now we are at our zipper panel. I have marked at 1/4 of an inch on each of these ends. I've put double stick tape, and as you can see here on the lining, I've already folded them in at 1/4 of an inch. So now I'm going to do the same thing to this side. Now I'm going to put these together because I want them to be the same size. So now I want to line them up on top of each other, and I want to fold this one down so it meets the lining right at the same point, just like that. Now I want to do the same thing to this side and make sure all 4 of them are the same size so that this panel is the same size on both edges. So you can see there that they are. So now what I want to do is I want to get my zipper and have it right side up. Let me open this up all the way. Then I want to take my vinyl and I want to put it right side down. So they should be right sides together, the vinyl and the zipper. And now I do not want to put this all the way to the edge, but I want it to extend just a hair. And then clip it all the way down. Okay, so now I'm looking at the back side of this zipper. Okay, so we can see the right side of the vinyl and the wrong side of the zipper. Now I want to grab one of my lining pieces and I want to put it right side down. So my vinyl piece and my lining should be right sides together. I want to clip all the way across. I also want to put a clip going this way so that that zipper doesn't move in or out. Okay, so now I want to sew across here all the way down using a 1/4 inch seam allowance or 1/4 inch seam allowance. I do not want to go beyond my panel. Okay, so I want to stop right there. Okay, so there it is, stitched on. And so now what I want to do is I want to fold both panels back on themselves. Okay, so there's my lining panel. Then here's my exterior. And I want to clip them on this side, because now I'm going to baste along the 3 sides and top stitch across the top. I'm going to start here and I'm going to top stitch across here all the way down and then down here and then baste it closed. Okay, there's one panel. So now I'm going to do the same thing on this side. When I'm pinning this side, what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to make sure that both of these panels are going to match up with themselves so that when this goes this way, then they'll be straight with each other. And as you can see that this side came out even as well. Okay, so there's our zipper panel. And so now we can go on to the next step. So now the next portion that we're going to be doing is the flap. I have my lining here, okay, and my flap with the foam on it. And I want to put them right sides together and then clip all the way around. I've marked here to where I will not be sewing across here because I want to leave this opening open so that we can turn this flap right side out. So I want to start here, backspace, go all the way around, and then come here and then stop Okay. And I'm going to be sewing this at a 1/4 inch seam allowance. Okay, so now I want to turn it right side out. Actually, I think I'm going to clip these edges here. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to press this whole thing so that my lining stays in place and it is pressed exactly where I want it. Because when I go ahead and top stitch this whole thing, I want to make sure that I'm not going to be able to see any of my lining coming on this side over here. Be very careful when I'm pressing this that I do not touch that vinyl. Okay, and now I'm using a little bit of spray starch on here. Now, let me glue these edges down. Okay, and once I top stitch this, this whole ridge will go away. Okay, but now I have to remember I'm putting a clasp inside of here. Let me show you, where is it? I just remembered I'm putting a turn lock right here, and so I need to put Decaville inside of here just to stabilize that a little bit more. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull this away from the foam, yeah, and put a piece of Decaville inside of there. So I can now turn this off. Oh no, actually I'll have to do it again. Okay, so now let me get a piece of Decaville first. Let's see. Oh, it has to be thicker. Okay, that should be okay. Let me make it a little smaller. Yep, that should be just right. Now what I want to do is I want to get my center, so I put that Decaville right in the center. Okay, so I want it right there. Okay. Now let's see. Okay, so right there. Okay, so that's about where I want it. Okay, I'm going to put this back down. Okay. Okay, so now when I put my clasp inside of there, on this side, that Decaville will be there to stabilize it. So that's good. So now I want to close this up again. Okay. Okay. Okay, so now I want to top stitch all the way around. And okay. Okay. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to put this aside. Now, she actually does have you top stitch across here first, but I'm going to save that since it's already on there really good and it's glued or basted. Now, she actually has you sew across here as well, but then you do a second stitch on top when you sew this to the back of the bag. I'm going to go ahead and just have one stitching line, so I'm not going to sew this right now, which is fine because since this is glued down, it's not going to move, so I'm doing good there. Okay, so now let's go on to our next step. Glue these edges down. Just remembered I'm putting a turn lock right here, and so I need to put Decaville inside of here just to stabilize that a little bit more. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull this away from the foam and put a piece of Decaville inside of there. That should be just right. Now what I want to do is I want to get my center, so I put that Decaville right in the center. Okay, so right there. Okay, so now when I put my clasp inside of there, on this side, that Decaville will be there to stabilize it. So that's good. So now I want to close this up again. Okay, so now I want to top stitch all the way around. Now she actually has you sew across here as well, but then you do a second stitch on top when you sew this to the back of the bag. I'm going to go ahead and just have one stitching line, so I'm not going to sew this right now, which is fine because since this is glued down, it's not going to move, so I'm doing good there. Okay, so now let's go on to our next step. I am now on step 5, which is making the slip pocket for the exterior. I have one exterior piece and one lining piece. I'm going to put them right sides together, clip across the top, sew using a 1/4 inch seam allowance. Now remember, this is tapered, so the shorter side is your top and the longer side is your bottom. Okay, now I want to turn my lining to the inside of my slip pocket, clip across the top, and then top stitch using a 1/8 inch seam allowance. Now I want to baste these 3 sides, again using a 1/8 inch seam allowance. Okay, my slip pocket is complete. Okay, so now I have my back panel with my foam on it, and I want to put my slip pocket on here, and then I want to baste all the 3 edges. Okay, so there's my back, and it's all complete with the slip pocket. Okay, so now I have my back panel, my bottom panel, and my front panel. I'm going to put that one aside for right now. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to clip this across the bottom and then sew across using a 1/4 inch seam allowance. Okay, so now I want to turn this out to the right side. Put a little finger press in it there. Now I want to top stitch across here on the bottom panel side using a 1/8 inch seam allowance. Okay, so now I want to grab my front panel. Now I want to do the same thing, clip across the bottom, sew using a 1/4 inch seam allowance, turn it, and then top stitch it on the bottom panel side. Okay, and there's our back and our front. Okay, so there's the front, the back, and the bottom. Okay, so now let's go on to our next step. Okay, I've pulled out one of my domestic machines and just put it right here next to my industrial. Okay, so now I have my front and my back here. Okay, and what I want to do is I want to attach the bottom base in the same manner I did the exterior. So I'm going to pin it across the top and then sew using a 1/4 inch seam allowance, turn it out on itself, and then top stitch. Before I sew on the other portion, I want to put that aside. I want to grab my back piece and I want to attach my slip pocket, and then I want to baste all the way around, and I have also added a little tag right here. It says "You look really pretty today." And now I want to baste across these 3 edges, and then I will be sewing it on to here, okay, and top stitching it just the same way I did this seam. Okay, so this is done, and I'm going to put it aside and then work on my side gussets. Okay, so now we are on step 6-3, and that is putting our side panels together. Okay, so now what I want to do is I want to sew this inside or top corner to here. Okay, it kind of, you know, when the first time I was just glancing at this, it kind of looks like it would just go on there like this, using the outside corner. But if you did that, let me turn it this way. See how it's too big? So that shows us we need to use this top or inside corner. In order to do that, this corner here needs to go with this corner. This corner needs to go with that corner. Okay, so let's start with this corner here. I'm going to take this corner and clip it to this corner over here. Just put a couple of clips in there. So now I'm going along this edge. This corner here needs to meet up with this corner. So I need to flip it around, making sure they're still right sides together, and clip it to this corner here. Okay, now see how everything looks like it's going to fit really nicely. And so now clip all the way around. You can see how that fits in there really nicely. Now right here where there's little tiny tucks, you can take just the slightest little snip in there and look how that disappears. Now make sure you don't go beyond the 1/4 of an inch seam allowance, or else you're going to have holes in your edge. Okay, see how everything went really well now? Okay, now I'm going to sew using a 1/4 inch seam allowance all the way around, and I'm going to sew with my side panel up. And as I come across this corner here, I'm going to really smush this down so that this corner stays right with itself, right where I want it to be. Okay, and look at right there. I got the slightest little tuck right there. What side is it on? It is on my panel side. So over here, what I might be able to do is just stretch it out a little bit. And what that is doing is it's dispersing the threads on there, just like that. Okay. Okay, just like that. You can see now that that little tuck there went away. Okay, and here's what the inside looks like. Now you have a choice here. You can go ahead and top stitch this on the side panel or gusset side, making sure that this seam allowance is towards your gusset, and then top stitch all right here, or you can just leave it like that. I'm going to go ahead and I am going to top stitch it so that you can see how it's done. Okay, so you can see here again I'm sewing with the right side up because automatically my seam allowance wants to go to this side, and so as I go around here I'll just keep going like that all the way around and top stitching, remember, on the gusset side. Okay, so now I'm going to do the same thing to the other side, and then I'll be back for the next step. Okay, so now I have both of my side panels and my main panel. I have marked my center points on both of these. And let me put that aside. Now I want to take my two center points and I want to match them up together and place a clip there. Place a clip on both sides of that one so that this doesn't shift on me. Like that. Now I want to clip the two upper edges and then clip all the way around. Okay, both of my sides are clipped on there. Now I want to sew this seam using a 1/4 inch seam allowance, and I want my gusset side to be up. Okay, so that looks good. Now let me turn it right side out so I can take a look at it and how it came out. Okay, so I like the way it came out. There are no tucks whatsoever. So now what I want to do is I want to top stitch this on the gusset side again. So I need to make sure that my seam allowance goes towards the gusset. So as I stitch here, it will be tacking down that seam allowance there. Now here is your choice. You don't have to top stitch this, but I'm going to top stitch it so that you can see how I've done it, just in case you choose to try it. But I'm going to be honest with you, this is a little bit more difficult. This is probably the most difficult part of this bag, what I thought. Now if you do choose not to top stitch it, you'll see like right here and right here, there are certain points that aren't smooth, and that is because they're needing to be clipped on the inside. So right there, so let me okay, now let's turn this to the right side, out again. Okay, and see how much more smoother that is? Okay, so now I'm going to go ahead and top stitch this so that you can see how I did it. now to do the other side. Okay, that top stitching came out pretty good. I definitely need to iron this. Figure out a way to iron it. But that stitching came out really good. I'm really happy with that. It is worth it to stitch it because it kind of gives it a finished off look. But if you don't want to stitch it, don't do it. Okay? Okay, so now let's go on to our next step. Okay, so now we are going to attach our flap to the back side of our purse. I hope you can see this. I've marked across here at the measurement that she gives you. Now remember, you're putting it on your back, and that's where your slip pocket is, okay? Your front should have nothing on it. Let me put a little bit of double stick tape here, just a tiny piece to hold that in place, because my vinyl wants to come out. Now my lining is on there really good, and it's holding down to the glue of the foam, but my vinyl piece is not. So I'm going to pull back my lining, put down my vinyl, and then stick my lining to the vinyl. When I make this bag again, because I will be making it again, it's such an adorable bag. Number one, I'm going to put Decaville inside of here so that my lining, I don't get this bunching here. Also, another thing I'm going to do is I'm going to sew on a strip of vinyl to this lining piece so that back here there is no lining showing, and it'll give it that clean edge. Okay, and the other thing I think I might do is leave this lining here, just leave it out just a little bit more so that it almost will look like a piping around that edge. I think that would be really pretty. Okay, so now let's get back to putting on our flap here. Let me fold this so that I can find the center. So now I want to match up right where that line is that I've drawn, and match it up like that. And I want to put a clip. Let's see, how can I do this? You know what? I'm going to put double stick tape here to hold it temporarily, and then after I've sewn it on, I'm going to remove the double stick tape. It's kind of fiddly to hold this here, but it can be done. Okay. Okay. So let me make sure that is right where I want it. How about this side? Right there. Okay, so now I want to sew using a 1/8 inch seam allowance across this back edge. And as I'm sewing this, I want to make sure my front area is out of the way completely. And my side gusset as well. That is really pretty. I really like this lining. Okay, and it's really coming together. You can see how it's really coming together. Okay, so you see here how the lining is showing? I don't like that. So in putting a piece of vinyl on the top and sewing it to my lining piece, just a strip, and then continuing to sew everything, I would have had lining here and then a piece of vinyl strip across the top. And then so when I went to top stitch this, if anything was coming onto this side, it would be the vinyl. And so you wouldn't really be able to notice that. Okay, so that's the change I will make the next time I do this bag. But I really like the way it's coming out. It's really cute. Okay, so now let's go on to our next step. Okay, I've turned my bag inside out, and I have removed the double stick tape from my flap. And now I'm putting my flap inside the bag, and I've also got my zipper panel and I've opened it all the way up. I've found my centers on my panel and the bag. Okay, so now the way you look at it in the picture, she has a flap on the back. So I want to make sure that that's the way I put my zipper panel in. So now I'm getting my zipper panel, closing it up, and I want to put it inside going this way. I want to match up my centers and clip it, then go to the other side and match the center there as well. And then I want to continue to clip my panel in there all the way on both sides. Okay, there's my panel and it's all clipped. So now I want to open up my zipper so that it'll be easier to sew. I want to baste across here using a 1/8 inch seam allowance. If you can see right here, what happened is when I went and I basted across here, because of my panel, it caused my basting to go off. So I'm going to go ahead and unpick this section and then baste it again. And then I'll be right back. I want to find the centers in my lining so that I can match them up with the centers in the bag. And I want to make sure too that the slip pocket is in the back. And I want to put in my lining right sides together. And I want to match up my centers and clip all the way around. Okay, now I want to sew this using a 1/4 inch seam allowance. Okay, so now that seam looks really good. Okay, now it's time to birth this bag. Remember, we have a hole in our lining, and that's how we'll turn it out. This is coming out really cute. I really like this. I like the vinyl, the lining, the zipper pulls, everything. Okay, so now I have to do a top seam around the whole top so that everything remains in place and that lining stays inside. So I'm going to go ahead and clip it, especially on the sides. It's just about the only place I can clip it because I want to really make sure that the lining isn't going to show from the outside. Give it one final pressing there. Let me move the flap out of the way so you can see what I'm doing. and give it a good finger press. Now you really want to be careful with this top stitching here too, because this is the main focus of your bag. Just like the outer top stitching areas, this one is really important also. So take your time here. If you come to a spot where your presser foot becomes unlevel, a hump jumper will definitely help you. So use the hump jumper to get over those spots, and then just continue. I'm trying to really make sure that the front of the bag doesn't get twisted up in my stitches either. Okay, now I'm all ready to apply my D-rings to the side right here. But first, I've got to put in the holes for the rivet. But first of all, what I want to do is I want to make sure that this D-ring stays together exactly where I want it. So I'm going to add double stick tape. Now I want to measure for the center of this D-ring. And I want to make sure that it is going to fit right on the bag. Then I'm going to use my hole punch and punch out the hole for the rivet. And now I'm going to do the same thing to the other side. Okay, now my D-rings are ready. Now what I've got to do is I've got to find the center of the panel so that I know that I am putting the D-ring right in that center. And then I've got to mark where I want that rivet to go. I've got to do the same thing on the other side. Okay, now it's time to punch the holes in the side panels of the bag. I want to make sure that I can see them first of all. And I want to make sure also that my zipper is out of the way completely. Okay, now do the other side. Okay, now it's time to put in the rivets. I'm using the rivets with the longer shaft in them. I want to start off with putting the rivet in the D-ring. Then I want to put it in the bag and then finish it off, putting it on the other side of the D-ring and then putting on the cap. Got to make sure that it looks even and everything looks good. And now I'm ready to set those rivets with my rivet press. Again, I want to make sure that I do not damage my zipper or zipper pull. I got to make sure it's out of the way. Now my D-rings are done. Okay, so now it is time for me to put on the turn lock. This is the top piece and it's going to go on right here. This here is the bottom piece and it is going to go on the bottom. Then I have 3 screws that I am going to use to attach these two together. Now first of all, what I've got to do is I've got to find the center of the flap. because I want to make sure that I am marking it right down the center so the turn lock is in the center. So I really want to put a little fold here to mark that. Now I want to grab my top piece and put it right on that center and really be careful that it is in the center and that my turn lock is also going right side up. Now I want to grab some kind of a marking utensil. I'm using an ink pen, and because I really want to be able to see what I'm doing, because this is where we are going to be cutting away the fabric. So now I want to get the back piece and put it on that same exact circle, and now I want to mark where my screw holes are. So I want to mark those because I want to cut for those two. Okay, so there is the hole there, and you can see the 3 screws and the hole that we are going to be cutting out of. Kind of looks like a little face. Now I want to share something with you. If you look at this face plate, and this is the back one, you see where the screw hole is? It is really very close to the edge. So I want to be really careful about cutting into that screw hole. If I go beyond the edge of the back plate, it is going to be ruined. There's nothing I can do to fix that. What I think I'm going to do is just put little snips into the screw holes so that it can accommodate or accept the screw to put those two together, and then I will be sure not to go too far. Now I've got a very sharp pair of scissors with a sharp tip on it, and I want to cut a hole in this bag right down the center where I want to put the hole to accommodate for my turn lock. Now I'm using my tailor's scissors because they are extremely sharp. Because I want to make sure that I have full control of how big this hole will be. I want to make sure, again, that I do not cut it too big. It's better to go just a little bit at a time than to go too much and then ruin your whole flap. That would be really awful because then the whole bag would be ruined. So as you can see, I've cut out the little hole there with only within a few layers, and now I'm going to go much further and go through all of the layers. But I'm going to do it little bit by little bit. Okay, I'm just about there. As you can see, I just need to shave off just a hair more. So I'm going to keep chipping away at it just little bit by little bit until I'm happy. Make sure it's all cleaned up. And I think that's it right there. So now I have the glue, and I want to add a little bit of glue to the face of my turn lock. And what this is going to do is not only is it going to kind of glue the fabric ends so that the fabric doesn't fray, but it is also going to make sure that it stays on there too. Now I want to make sure that I'm putting it on right side up. That would be so awful if I attached it and the cat was upside down. So I want to make sure that I'm doing it the right way. And now I'm flipping it over and putting on the back piece. I want to clean up the glue in the center. And now I want to poke the holes through right where my screws go. This is the first time I've ever done one of these, and I'm really happy with the way it came out. Okay, now I need to take my ink pen again, and I need to now mark for the other piece. So I need to mark where the prongs are going to go. Now I want to cut the holes for those prongs, and I want to be really careful not to go any further because I want them to be snug inside of there. Okay, now I'm cutting a piece of Decaville Heavy, and that is to stabilize that side. Now I have my washer, and I'm going to be bending each prong down onto my washer with the Decaville in the middle. So now I've got to really work hard at putting those prongs down. And there you go. You can see that I got it. And now I want to make sure that everything is good. I really like the way this came out. There you have it, the roly-poly bag. I know that you'll like it. Don't forget to go over to StarMade Patterns Facebook group and share all your makes with us because we want to see what you've done. Okay, until next time, I'll talk to you later. Bye.